The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Kate Chopin was born in 1850 and died in 1904. She is a famous American novelist and short story author. Married to Oscar Chopin at the age of 19, she moved with him to New Orleans, where she would spend the next decade of her life, giving birth to 6 children within 8 years. Her major work, The Awakening, is celebrated by later feminist scholars as a seminal work of American feminism. Her short story work, however, The Story of an Hour, expresses equal sentiment for the feminist movement. It follows a couple by the names of Louisa and Brent Mallard. Upon her husband's presumed death in a railroad accident, Louisa is liberated. She muses that there would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. Married young, she says that she had left him sometimes, implying no abuse or marital hardship, suggesting a social and systematic problem unspecific to the Mallards' relationship. Ultimately, Brent Mallard returns safely without dying, and Louisa is left hopeless to her societal circumstances. As it pertains to the historical context of this story's time, intellectually there were increased educational opportunities for women, increased literary and intellectual presence of women in culture, therefore. This translates into Kate Chopin's ability to express herself through authorship, as well as to Louisa Mallard's ability to reason and hope for something bigger than just domestic life. Domestically, however, typically girls usually married in their early to mid-20s. They were traditionally the homemakers, nothing more. Moreover, there was a doctrine of separate spheres that was prominent for the time. This was the idea that men and women existed differently and separately, although married. Naturally, this would lead to a feeling of alienation from Mrs. Mallard, which the reader experiences through her during her time. Womanhood denoted moral authority, leaving the possibility of divorce and adultery out of the question. This again translates into Mrs. Mallard's. In terms of feminist application, the first wave feminism goals that were prevalent during the time of this publication focused largely on legal issues and the right to vote. Married women fighting to be allowed to own and inherit property and obtain legal identity independent from their husbands. Women also were fighting to be allowed to stand in political elections, and they also fought to end employment sex discrimination. In terms of Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour, Mrs. Mallard is generally attempting to gain independence and identity from her husband. You get the tone that she doesn't really know who she is and doesn't really have much of an existence apart from the fact that she is the wife of Brent. And that was what was so appealing to her in living for herself after her husband's death, was the fact that she would be able to gain some autonomy and some sense of self that way. Inability to overcome her circumstances maritally, and to just feel this entrapment, this oppression by Brent Mallard within marriage. the story's ending. Controversially, Louisa Mallard dies of joy. The line is, when the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. And ultimately, a lot of issues arise from that in terms of critical theory. Whether or not Mrs. Mallard ultimately achieves free will, whether she is experiencing joy at the story's end with the return of her husband, or if she is losing the joy that she had felt once she overcame the struggles of marriage that Brent represented. Um, so in the end, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and I think Kate Chopin leaves the reader up for